Okay, we are back. It's been almost probably 21 hours since we completed this part of the project. If you watch the last video, you'll see how much that we use a lot of product on here to get to this stage. So I wanted to make sure when we put our final coat of sealer on here, it had a good chance to cure pretty good before we moved on and applied a stencil on top of this. If I could have waited another day, I probably would, but I'm also on a time crunch with this because this needs to be done by this weekend, so I can't really wait too much longer. So we're just gonna make a little prayer and take every precaution we can to prevent any bleeds, and we're gonna move on. As you've seen before when we did the P, my transfer tape that I used, the contact paper, wasn't quite big enough to hold this. So I know for this one I'm going to have issues. I'm going to show you how I go ahead and set up a new transfer tape and how I prime it. So I'm going to set this aside. And I've been using this rag to kind of buffer the sawtooth hanger. Okay, so this is also duck brand contact paper, but it's clear. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of roughly measure out how wide I want this piece. Sometimes I'll just use two smaller pieces, but I think for this one I'm just going to go ahead and use one. So I'm going to cut this off this roll. And this is probably my second roll of clear contact paper I use for transfer tape that I've ever had, period, because this stuff lasts forever, and you can just keep using it over and over again until it loses its stickiness or until it gets too much debris, and then you have to cut up another piece and go from there. I got some big chunks here. Now sometimes if I'm doing decals, I'll prime my contact paper here, my clear contact paper on the kitchen counter where it's doesn't have all this fiber, because it kind of looks dirty after you do that. If you don't have any fur babies in your house, you could actually do this also on your furniture. That'll help prime it quicker. I'm just trying to separate because this comes in 2 layers. And I'm having issues. There we go. So I'm doing my best just to pull it apart without making any wrinkles, but if it does, it's not the end of the world. There's a wrinkle. Save this sheet because we'll just keep putting it back on there to store it. I'm just going to put it right there on my drop cloth. This is how I prime my stencils, either on like something like here or on my kitchen counter. And it's just like that, and just keep doing it, because the better it's prepared, the easier it'll be able to remove once you put it over your stencil. Because if you don't prime it good, you're going to have a really hard time removing this over your stencil. So I'll do this several times to prime it. So each time I do that, I'm getting more of the fibers. Onto there. Let's try it one more time. Okay, just like that. Okay, so it still might need a couple of uses before it gets to the perfect spot, but we're just going to go ahead and go with it. And actually, I'm going to trim this down just a little bit because I've got the border here, but then the stencil, the silhouette wouldn't cut past here, so that's why that's kind of ripped off here and here. So I'm just going to trim this down because I really don't need that. Okay, just kind of made my markings. Just make sure I don't cut my actual stencil design. If you're working on like on a 12-inch round, you'll be able to get more of the border. So got a little bit of bubble there. I might have to play with that when we get that on there, because bubbles like that will cause bleeds. Okay, put your clear contact paper sticky side down, right over it. I just have a regular burnishing tool, and I'm not sure where I actually got this at, but this just happens to be my favorite one. I like the size of it. Not too big, not too small. And then slowly remove the backing. If you notice any of the letters coming up, you'll just push the backing down, back onto the transfer tape. And also looking for anything that you might have not weeded that should have been weeded, because sometimes I've done that too. See right there, I got that coming up, so just push it back down. Just like that. Okay, I grab my board. And I'm just using this rag to protect my table from the sawtooth hanger on the back side. Okay, now this we're just going to have to eyeball. You can lay it on here, but don't push it down until you find the spot that you really want it at. And then just kind of watch the lining here, kind of see if it lines up here and kind of lines up here. And then I always start in the middle and just kind of work my way out. And kind of start in the middle and work your way out. Okay. Now we're going to slowly remove the clear contact paper. And also we'll use this to kind of help hold the letters down. And while you're doing this, also look for anything that might be missing, because sometimes you'll lose the letters when you're transferring. And if that happens, you can always go back in your design, ungroup it, and then pick out the specific letter you want, and you can cut just that specific letter if you like to replace it. When it comes in the design program, once I have my original copy, I usually make a second copy, and that's where I do my editing. I don't resize it, but that's where I do my editing, so my original stays the same. This is coming out pretty good. So it's very important to prime this piece. Otherwise you'd have a very hard time getting that off there. Where'd my sheet go? There it is. Okay, so to save this, this is a sticky side up. Don't use the side with the graphs, because then it'll stick and you won't be able to use it again. Use a clear side to put that down on the sticky side. And that's how you'll store it for the next use. There we go. So I've got my baby wipes handy for later. I had to rearrange a little bit because I was losing things. Let me see. Okay. I've just got regular brushes. I'm just going to use this cheap brush to apply Mod Podge on. Since this background has different coloring, I won't use the coffee bean or mud puddle to burnish, because the colors have changed with all the blending we did and sanding. So I'm just checking to make sure everything's pushed down, there's no bubbles. And when we're painting, we're going to have to make sure and watch that too. The part over the P we'll kind of have to keep an eye on to make sure nothing bleeds underneath where the background and the P meet. So I'm going to use this cheap brush to apply Mod Podge on there. And we're just going to paint it on like we did with the P. So I like doing my designs in borders. That represents what I'm going to be putting them on, because that kind of helps me with keeping them centered. If your design's centered and your border's centered, you should be good, as long as you've measured the board right. I'm just kind of going in different directions. And I already know I've got something missing, because I'm supposed to have a, oh no, there it is right there. It blended in with the marble background, the dot for the eye. Because sometimes I've missed them. Christian has 2, no for Jensen, okay. So, just something to watch out for. And normally when it comes time to painting, I'll do 2 coats when I'm doing a light color on a dark background. So we'll definitely let the first coat dry and see if it needs a second coat. Usually it does, but not always, depending on what's going on or how heavy-handed you get. We're going to try and be light-handed here, especially with the multi-level background surface here. Yeah, because you can see part of the P right there is curling up a little bit. And if we get any bleeds, I'll show you how I usually fix them up. If it's not too bad, we can just do a baby wipe over them. That right there's bubbled up a little bit. So make sure you get pushed down, and we'll have to watch that when it comes time to painting to make sure that doesn't bleed through. Because when it comes time to painting, I'll probably push that down and paint it first and then come back to it again later once it's dry. You got the period behind established, gotta make sure you weed that. I've forgotten that before and had to go back and add it. I love this font, but this font during humid times can kind of be a little bit of a headache because some of the part of it's so thin. But these are, the size of this is a little bit bigger. So we'll see if we have any issues with that, with it pulling up any paint. When we get done, we'll see. But she really wanted this font, so I tried getting this in as big as I could and still making it look right. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry and then we'll come back and we will start stenciling. If you got any questions, let me know, and I will see you in just a little bit. Okay, we are ready. I'm going to use Dixie Belle's cotton for my lettering. Make sure you can see that right. So we put the Mod Podge on here. I've got a little area I'm going to have to watch over here so it doesn't bleed. All the little areas where the P's at behind there, we'll just kind of have to be careful. And do a light, probably do a couple light layers. So I'm going to use a stencil brush, or you can always use a rubber pouncer, a foam pouncer I mean. So now comes another fun part, or the part I usually enjoy. So I just will usually go out of my lid, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my troubled area over here first. So I can get it while I know it's down. And then we just start stenciling our design. And just don't forget all the little dots for the eyes. in the periods just in case they blend in. And just pounce on your paint color. And I always go with a light color like white, like this cotton or fluff for my lettering with these signs. That way it really kind of shows up. Because you got the neat dark background, and then this usually really pops. And usually when I stencil, I make sure I have enough time in the day to let the paint dry really good. So, and make sure and pull the stencil the same day. I don't like my stencil sitting on my signs more than a day. Usually just a couple of hours at the most. Because I don't want the paint getting too secure to the stencil, and that makes it more likely for you to pull the paint up also when it comes time to removing the stencil from your boards. So just like that. In the middle, when it's really super dry, the paint will dry within 15-20 minutes. I'll just go ahead and usually pull the stencil up. When it's humid like this, I might wait maybe an hour. And I've got the ceiling fan on too, which will help the paint to dry. I don't like using heat guns on my stencils because I don't want to risk the glue from the backing of this to get tacky on my wood back there, because I've had that happen I think once, where I had residue from the stencil left over. And I don't remember using a heat gun on it, but I think I had a bad contact paper, because that roll of contact paper cost me about $6. I ended up throwing the roll away because it just wasn't worth it. Just going to be careful around this area because I got the P behind there as part of the background. We got a layer of Mod Podge on there. Now we're adding our first layer of paint. An idea of pouncing is to do light coverage. Because if we do a brush, we can do a brush technically, but then you risk pushing paint up underneath the stencil if you got areas that aren't adhered very well. And also pouncing gives it a nice texture to the lettering too. So if you got any questions, just put them in the group and make sure you tag me so that way I'll see it and I can help you out. And don't forget, to share off some of your projects. I'd love to see them. And if you develop any new tricks or tips or whatever, if you want to share them, feel free to, and make this design your own. Because yeah, you can do the background with glazing, you can do it with paint like I did. You could probably use stain. Okay, one more, and I gotta make sure and get the period there and the comma. So if we have any bleed throughs, I'll show you how I fix them. If I have any paint that accidentally pulls up when I pull the transfer up, I'll also show you how I'll fix that. Sometimes I will recut part of the stencil. Other times I might freehand it. It just kind of depends on what's going on. But yeah, that little part of the font right there, this one might give me a little trouble, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. And that little, from the M to the A on May, that is super tiny too, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see how it turns out. I got a lot of paint on that one, so I'll just probably go back and just do this and just kind of spread it around a little bit. Okay, we'll let this dry, and more than likely I'll come back and do a second coat. We'll just kind of wait and see. So we'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, the first layer of cotton is dry. I'm definitely doing a second coat. I don't know if you can see that very well. Pretty good coverage, but I want it more solid white. So we're going to do a second coat. So let me grab my brush. I saved it in my Ziploc baggie. I do shake my paint. I just try not to shake my sealer. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing again, and with the area that I worry about, I'll make sure it's pushed down good, and I'll do that first. And then go from there. Okay. So we've got a layer of Mod Podge, a layer of cotton, and we're putting our second layer of cotton on here. I'm not meaning to go heavy on here, but it's kind of coming off that way. So I'm going to just kind of carefully pounce it around and spread it around a little bit. Because you got to think, the thicker the paint, the more likely it will also adhere to your stencil too when it comes time to pulling up. So I'm going to try and keep it thin. It'll dry quicker. Still give you good coverage. Yeah, because 2 coats will be more than enough. And when we get done here, we're gonna let this sit and dry for I'll probably wait a good half hour, and then I'll come back on and we'll do a little bit of sanding to kind of break up the paint with the stencil, and then I will very slowly pull it up around areas, especially around the thin parts of the font. Yeah, I'm just spreading that around because that kind of went on a little thick. Yeah, because like the N is super thin. So when I do my designing, I try and keep them so they're not smaller than 1.5 inches. That's usually the smallest I like to go. If I do have to go smaller, I avoid this font. It's Snell Round Hand. I did that again. I usually avoid this font if I have to go smaller than 1.5 inches. I usually do when I do designs, when I get a request, I'll usually provide like 3 different options, and if I know what size sign they want or whatever, I won't even put that in as an option. So that's my way of avoiding it, because I did do one for my nephew and niece. It turned out really good, but oh, it gave me lots of headaches because it was like 1.25 inches about this font, and I was doing it about this time of the year, and it just, whew, it was interesting. So, because I had to do some cutting of the stencils and repairing, and That was before I did too much freehand. I did a little bit of freehand, but not too much. So yeah, so when you got a font like this, you know, it's really pretty. You just gotta watch the sizing of it. Sometimes it's like trial and error. You just gotta play around and see what you can work with, you know, what you know, issues you might have. Because before starting this, I never would have dreamed it would have mattered what the weather was like, you know, if it's humid or there's moisture in the air, and how it affects the paint here and how it dries. So usually in the middle of the summer, like in August, I'm back to doing fine. Wintertime, it's wonderful because it's so dry in here. It dries fast, it dries great. I hardly ever have to worry about paint pulling up with the stencil. It's just usually this time of the year, and we're talking, this is May. Sometimes it starts in April. Usually by June it starts getting better. It just depends. So yeah, 2 coats definitely works with this. That way I have good coverage. And then this font, the same font, but this is like about 1.5 inches. This is just a little bit bigger. And normally I keep Christian and Jensen and then established signs are established about the same size. And I like to play up the last name. Okay, it doesn't look like that bubbled up. I shouldn't probably have pounced over that area. I should have left it alone, since that might be my trouble spot there. And if I would have decided to pull this wet, I probably would have cut the whole stencil, but I do have areas where it's almost too close, and there's times when I've actually done a stencil like this and I've actually gone through with scissors and cut in between, and then I'll paint that one area and then pull that one area, and then carefully paint the next area and then pull it. But that also, you gotta be careful when you pull a stencil with wet paint on it, because sometimes the paint can splatter back on the board if you're not careful. So I always like to pull when it's dry, but sometimes I have to pull wet. I love making these personalized signs with these backgrounds. These are probably my all-time favorites. That and my growth charts. The Whimsy growth chart I recently did, I think that's my all-time favorite. That and I did a mountain scene for my great nephew. So I think those 2 are my all-time favorites, with the Whimsy probably being my favorite. It's fun just getting in here and playing and just kind of seeing what you do, because the Whimsy growth chart was a combination of the stencil, of course, but then I did a lot more freehand than I normally do. So, and that was so much fun to play with all those flowers and the background and making the paint look like watercolor. So, okay, that is it for this round. We're gonna let this sit and dry thoroughly. And when I think it's ready for me to pull, I will come back on and we'll move on to the next step. Make sure. Yeah. And then we'll move on to the next step. So remember, if you got any questions, just come back into the group and ask them and tag me, so that way I make sure I see it, and I'll be happy to answer. So I will see you in just a little bit. Okay, the moment of truth. I'm gonna go ahead and use my 20 grit sand block paper. We've done sand block, I'm sorry, not paper. We've done 2 coats of cotton, and I'm gonna just go over circular motions over my stencil to kind of break up the seal between the stencil and the paint, hopefully. Okay. Now there have been times, not with this font, that I have actually gone over this and actually done a coat of sealer, but I'm not doing that because it's going to make it probably more likely that my stencil might pull up some more paint. So we're just going to carefully pull up the stencil a little at a time. And actually I'm going to probably cut it in pieces so I can work on one section at a time. And be careful when you're using something like this, anything with sharp, you don't want to scratch your background either, because sometimes that can happen too. I'm just kind of following the stencil along the lettering and pulling as I go. And kind of trying to do it at diagonal. Just being careful along those skinny little letters, numbers. Because these areas right here are prone to being pulled up. So yeah, if you've got a thicker font, this will be easier. But this is a delicate font that I used. I got that little area there to kind of fix. area to fix. And I got the T to fix, so yeah, it's breaking up a little bit. So just, that's the whole point, about going slowly. And making sure if you use the sharp point, make sure you're going sideways into it and not straight down, because you can scratch your background. There we go. This one might be an issue right here too, because this is just a little bit smaller. So we're going to go ahead and try and do this a little bit last. Give it more time. Maybe. I'll have to fix that little area that just popped up. Sorry I'm so quiet, I'm concentrating. Okay, I was able to save that pretty good. Sometimes those corners can be a pain, so if you go take the stencil off going into the corner, sometimes that usually helps. my little bleed. Now I'll have to fix that line. I got a little fuzz there somehow. So I'll have to fix that. I have got water for my coffee going. Let me go turn that off real quick. Wait, please. Overall, it's going better than I thought it was going to. I do have some small areas to fix, and I'll use like a very fine detailed artist brush probably to work on that. So the more careful I am, the less I'll have to fix. Remember, this is a delicate font, so that's why I'm being extra careful. Not all fonts are like this. I pulled some paint up that way. Didn't mean to. Lost part of the end there, so yeah, you just gotta be careful what font you use. I was expecting that one to give me a hard time. Just be careful with your pokey thing there, you don't gouge the background. Almost need small scissors for that. Okay, where are we at? Ooh, that worked. Okay. end was perfect, that one wasn't. Isn't that something? Now this is Snell round hand. So if this font scares you, go ahead and use something else. There's lots of pretty fonts with thicker lines you can definitely use. Okay, now this is my T. Let's see if we can save that one. Well, that S just went. Save the T, but the bottom of the T and the S just went. So I'll have to fix that. Remember, this is smaller than that font, so overall we're not doing too bad. I'm gonna have to find one of my brushes that's small enough I can do details. If I get any areas where I get a little too thick on my lines, I can clean them up with this baby wipe and put it over the spatula and just kind of clean up along the edges. So far so good. Fix it line there. I'll just kind of go along the sides, just kind of go over each letter. That'll need fixed, that'll need fixed. I'm going to probably fill that in a little bit right there. This will need fixed, that'll need fixed. So yeah, this font was very delicate. Hopefully it didn't scare you away, but there's tons of fonts out there you can use. So I'm going to go gather my supplies and I'll be back, and I got to finish that little loop there. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, we are back. I had to go upstairs and do some digging. A while back I stocked up on some paint brushes from Hobby Lobby. I was going to do a class, and I grabbed the number 6 round. I usually use those for touch-ups for small areas. I'm going to try and do what I can without cutting another piece of a stencil. When I do this, I normally try and work away from me down, so that way if I work down here, I don't want to get my hand over it and mess up. So we're just going to do our best, see how we do. And one of the reasons why we did the sealer on this before we put this on here is so if we make a mistake and I have to come back with baby wipes, I can kind of wipe it up a little bit. Oh, come on. There we go. I'm trying to get my jar open. So I'm just going to dip my brush and just do my best. And so if it looks a little rough now, I can come back here after a bit and come back and kind of clean it up a little bit with my baby wipes. So remember that T there, I'm going to kind of try and get it to look like that down here. So that's a little bit rough there, but I'll come and clean that up here just a little bit. that's going to be a little bit rough, but I'll have to kind of clean it up. When I get buildup, I'll just go ahead and wipe it down and keep it into a fine point. I get a buildup of paint. Okay, got that spot there I wanted to fix. Kind of like painting the lines, kind of. Okay. Make sure I don't miss anything else. We'll do the S here. Try that again. What is that? Yeah, that wasn't too neat, but I can fix that. Okay, we'll go on to our E. So my brush is still pointing. I didn't bend the bristles because I really don't want to yet. If I can keep it small like that, especially with these fine lines. Okay, now I gotta figure out the T here because this one didn't come off really good. And you'll have a little outline from the Mod Podge, so you can kind of know where to go, and then just kind of smooth that out a little bit. And be careful here with the where you've already painted. Yeah, sometimes it's just easier just to go back and touch it by hand than cut a new stencil or a new letter. It just kind of depends on what's going on. If you use a thicker font, you shouldn't have this issue. It. Okay, I think that's it. That wasn't too bad. And sometimes it just takes practice, because trust me, I'm not good at freehanding. It just takes some practice, and if you get a little wild, you can come back with a little baby wipe and kind of smooth it. You just gotta be careful how much you rub and how long you rub. So I just kind of go along the lines and just kind of smooth it out a little bit. If I have to get on the other side, just turn it. Oops, got a line going off for some reason. Hang on. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that around the pointy end very carefully. And I can just kind of get in there a little bit. I gotta be careful I don't poke that right through the baby wipe. And just clean it up a little bit. And same here with the end on here. It's a little bit rough with my hand, free hand. Wanting to poke through. Let me see if I can do it better this way. Just like that around the spatula part. I'm just kind of smoothing it out a little bit. And get the other side. Now from where you're at, you're probably not seeing what I'm working on, but I just got a few areas where I freehanded it. It's just a little bit rough. Now that one came apart like that, so I'm gonna see if I can clean that up. If you do this within, you know, like an hour or two of painting is best. Waiting until the next day to clean it up is not good because this paint will set. And yeah, you gotta be careful with the background because you don't want to do too much rubbing on it. You'll kind of rub the background up. Technically, it's still curing still. There we go. Here a little bit. Okay, that's it, guys. So I'm gonna let this set until tomorrow, and I'll come back and we'll do 2 coats at least, maybe 3 of sealer on here, and I will get pictures taken, and I will be ready to have this picked up by Thursday as the plan is, because they're getting married, I think this Saturday it looks like. Let me get this little area right here. I'm just kind of going in small little circles here. I'll kind of smooth that out. And don't rub hard. There we go. That's it. So, any questions, let me know. I will talk to you guys later. Good morning. Okay, it's morning for me. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. We have completed each step, but the final step that we need to do is to do a final coat of sealing. We've done sealer throughout the process, and that was to help protect each layer that we were working on in case a mistake was made. We can kind of go back and maybe fix it up if we needed to with like a damp baby wipe, or wrapped around like a spatula here, the pottery spatula that I like to use because it's got that nice little pointy edge. Sometimes I'll use this, but I gotta be careful that because a baby wipe this will go right through the baby wipe. So that, or you can use like a lint-free, I like to use a lint-free cloths that are made from cloth diapers. So we didn't have to really use that too much, which is okay, but we're gonna go ahead and seal this. I'm gonna go back to my Dixie Belle's clear coat in flat. Oh my, I'm sorry. And I'm going to use my favorite Klingon brush because I love how the bristles are. This has been soaking. I did a boo-boo and I've had it soaking in water, and I kept changing the water, but I never actually did the final pull it out and let it dry, which is okay to have the bristles damp. So I just went ahead and pulled it out, wiped it on my towel, and the bristles are just damp, but they're not sopping. So let me go ahead, and we're gonna go ahead and put this lid back on and kind of roll this around because I didn't grab a tongue depressor and I want to get this mixed up. So just like that. Kind of like bottle of insulin, if you guys are ever familiar with that. You roll, you don't shake. There we go, to help prevent bubbles. Okay, so now when it comes with the lettering, I like to do these the next day, and I like to do just one wipe, hopefully, because I don't want to risk, I mean, with Dixie Belle, it's got the clear coat in there, but it takes 30 days to cure, but I don't want to risk loosening this up. It shouldn't, since we waited a day, but just be on the safe side. I'm going to try and stick with one, maybe two brush strokes. We'll let that set, come back, and we'll do another pass when it's dry. There we go, just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and go up and down. So that's good. We will let this dry. We'll come back maybe about 30 minutes. We'll do a second coat, repeat the same process. I'm going to probably do 3 coats for full protection. And then when I make sure and drop this off, I'm going to let her know so she knows that this is all curing, and it takes 30 days to not put anything heavy on there, because with everything, with the clear coat on there, it takes 30 days to cure. It might leave an indentation. So, and we don't want that to happen. That way she can also let the gifties know also. Okay, we'll be back in about 30 minutes. Hello, it's been 30 minutes already. I have my timer set. And in the meantime, I used my same brush. I actually put it in a fresh jar of water just up to the bristles. And I just pulled it out, and I'm just kind of doing the same thing I did before. Just getting the excess water off after I shaked it off. So we'll set that aside here. We've got 1 coat of sealer on here. I just dripped water on there. And in between coats of sealer, I like to do my 220 grit sand block, and I'll just lightly scuff it up. When it comes time to doing the final coat, we will not use this. Or I should say after we do the final coat. Just like that, and wipe off any debris. I think I see something right there. There we go, yeah. So just watch for any debris. Okay, we got our sealer. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it, because it likes to, oh, I'm trying to think of the word, where everything settles. There we go. Grab our brush. And now we've got 1 coat over the words. I'm not quite so worried about losing anything or anything smearing. I just want to get full coverage. And usually with 3 coats you can get a really good coverage. So I'm just going from end to end, making sure I don't do any drips off to the side. Those are fixable, but they're a little bit hard to. And one thing I didn't do was just go around the edges. And just add a final coat of sealer, because we've kind of done some extra painting with all the stuff we've done. Oh, there's my timer. I got timers going off all the time. Okay, so we'll do that again on our final coat. So let me put that there. I think I'm gonna stick that there for now, and I'm gonna put this up so I don't set the sides down and risk getting anything on there from my drop cloth below. And then I usually rub my fingers along the bottom to make sure there's no drips. Just kind of like that. I'm not rubbing the sides, I'm rubbing my fingers, I'm cupping my fingers and just rubbing along the bottom to make sure there's no drips. And that's it. So we'll come back in about 30 minutes and we'll repeat the same process, and then we'll be done. So see you in a little bit. Okay, we are on our final coat of sealer. So I'm gonna go do one more round, my last round of using of a sand block just to scuff up the previous sealer, give a little traction, wipe off any dust. Just kind of look things over. I still have it on top of here because I'm going to go ahead and do the sides again. And then we'll have to check and make sure. There we go. Check and make sure we got everything covered and there's no drips underneath. Even though this is the back side, I still don't want any drips. So that's also why I like doing the back side first, so that way I can check everything and make sure everything's in order before I flip over and do the front side. So we're going to take our sealer, roll it around. Didn't do much settling this time. Sometimes these jars get stuck. If you're next to your sink, I will turn mine upside down and bang it level. You just gotta be careful because there have been times where I have busted the lid. So that you do that at your own risk. That's also why I like sticking to smaller jars. Okay, here we go. I'm kind of leaning off the side to kind of look for the glistening of the sealer, so I know that I've got full coverage. Going level with the grain. Yep. Sometimes it's just hard to see. But with these 3 coats, we should have everything covered 100%. There we go. Okay, so I got that. Now we'll go ahead and just kind of go around the sides again. And then I'll keep it back on that container until this is dry. Oh, I got something sticking there. Don't want you there. And I'll set the timer again for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to start taking pictures. I have 2 staging walls I have now set up. One in my living room. I'm working on a faux mantle place, which, well, I shouldn't say I'm working on it. It's on my honey-do list of things to get done. The top half I did a test job of painting to see if I would need to do any priming, and there's some areas where the tannins are showing through, but I'm still able to use part of that for pictures. So for now I can still use the shelf part and kind of decorate around it, but I'm planning on adding molds to that faux fireplace. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to do some aging with it with some glaze or maybe some more paint. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of, it's going to be a little bit, I've got to get caught up in my personal requests first. And my other staging wall is my faux shiplap wall that I have here in the dining room. I have a blog post about that, so you can see how I used regular frog tape and paint that I had on hand. I had some Sherwin-Williams naval sample jar that I used for my pinstripes, and I love how it turned out. So I have technically 2 matching walls, but my other matching wall is just across the room from it on the other side of the bay window. And I have a hutch on there, so I technically can move it, but it's going to be a pain in the butt if I ever need to. So I have 2 staging walls, technically 3, but one's upstairs where I'm right now storing everything because I'm painting my house. There we go. Make sure there's no drips along the bottom. There shouldn't be because I was pretty light-handed with this. But if there are, you can catch it now. And I'll set it on top of my container there so it's not sitting on my drop cloth. I don't want to get any dust or anything on there on the sealer while it's still drying. And that is it. So about 30 minutes and I'll start taking pictures, and I'll make sure to share them. Don't forget, if you have any questions, please ask in our private group. You can also email me. The contact information is on my webpage, melissapetersondesigns.com. Also, I'd love to see your projects you're working on and see how you do. So feel free to show them off, because I'd love to see them. So any questions, let me know. You guys have a great time. Thank you so much for joining me on this project, and I hope you learned something. I know some of it's, some of it's back to basics, but there's nothing wrong with that. So you guys have a great day, and I hope to hear from you soon.